The underground network of private armies for the wealthy throughout history. The wealthy and powerful have always sought ways to secure their interests, protect their assets, and extend their influence. In modern times, the ability to control private security has evolved into something far more sophisticated, far-reaching, and in many ways, more concerning. Beneath the surface of conventional military operations and public law enforcement exists a shadowy world, a global network of private armies hired by billionaires, corporations, and even governments to conduct operations that often evade public scrutiny. This world of elite private military contractors, covert paramilitary groups, and mercenary forces is the hidden muscle that helps shape global events behind the scenes. At first glance, the idea of wealthy individuals and corporations employing private forces may sound like something ripped straight from the pages of a dystopian novel, but the reality is much closer than most realize. The business of privatized warfare has expanded dramatically in the 21st century, fueled by global instability, weakened national militaries, and a demand for specialized combat expertise. Unlike traditional national armies, these private forces operate with far fewer restrictions, often skirting international laws and avoiding the accountability that would typically be placed on government-backed militaries. One of the most well-known modern private military corporations, PMCs, is the now infamous Blackwater, later rebranded as Academy. Founded by former Navy SEAL Eric Prince, Blackwater gained notoriety for its involvement in the Iraq War, where its contractors were implicated in controversial killings, human rights violations, and clandestine operations. The firm was employed by the US government for security and combat operations, but as reports of its abuses surfaced, the world got a glimpse into just how powerful and unregulated these forces could be. Though Blackwater was one of the first BMCs to gain public recognition, it is far from the only player in the field. Today, numerous firms operate worldwide, providing private armies to the highest bidder. While some PMCs work under government contracts for military and security purposes, many also offer their services to private clients, billionaires, multinational corporations, and even organized crime syndicates. These forces are used for everything from protecting oligarchs and executives in unstable regions to conducting operations that go beyond the reach of national law enforcement. In some cases, these private militaries are even used offensively, engaging in assassinations, sabotage, and paramilitary interventions where direct government involvement would be too politically sensitive. The ultra-wealthy who hire these forces aren't just securing bodyguards, they're acquiring entire war machines. Private military contractors are often composed of former special forces operatives, intelligence agents, and elite commandos, many of whom bring extensive combat experience from their time in national armies. Some of these groups operate on the fringes of legality, carrying out missions that range from corporate espionage and infrastructure sabotage to full-scale military engagements in resource-rich regions. Their presence is most commonly felt in conflict zones like the Middle East, Africa, and South America, where traditional governance is weak, and money often speaks louder than laws. The sheer level of influence that these private forces wield is staggering. Some have been accused of overthrowing governments, destabilizing nations, and shifting the balance of power in conflicts. One notable example is the role of Wagner Group, a Russian paramilitary organization with ties to the Kremlin. Though officially a private entity, Wagner has been linked to operations in Ukraine, Syria, Libya, and various African nations, often acting as an unofficial arm of Russian foreign policy while maintaining plausible deniability. Wagner's brutal tactics and effectiveness in war zones highlight the growing power of these shadow armies. But it's not just nations employing these groups. Billionaires and corporate entities have begun using PMCs for more than just protection. They are leveraging them as strategic tools to secure resources, intimidate rivals, and even manipulate geopolitics. In resource-rich regions, powerful oil and mining conglomerates have employed private forces to suppress labor uprisings, displace indigenous communities, and secure their monopolies over lucrative extraction sites. Reports have surfaced of these contractors engaging in brutal crackdowns on civilian populations, all to ensure continued profits for their employers. As the line between private security and military operations continues to blur, questions arise about accountability. Who holds these organizations responsible when they commit war crimes or operate beyond the law? Governments often look the other way because these forces provide valuable services without the political liability that comes with deploying national troops. If a private military contractor is caught committing human rights violations, the blame can be deflected onto a rogue company rather than a sovereign nation. This ambiguity allows both governments and corporations to maintain a degree of separation from the actions of these forces, creating a dangerous loophole for global power brokers. Despite these concerns, the industry continues to thrive. Advancements in technology have only made these private armies more effective, with sophisticated surveillance, drone capabilities, and cyber warfare operations now part of their arsenals. Private intelligence agencies, often linked to PMCs, provide reconnaissance and data-driven targeting for these groups, making them even more formidable. The wealthiest individuals on the planet now have access to military-grade capabilities, effectively creating private war machines at their disposal. The implications of this growing industry are profound. As private military groups become more powerful, the traditional monopoly of force held by nation-states is eroding. If billionaires and corporations can wage war independently of national governments, the consequences for global stability could be dire. With little oversight and even fewer regulations, the rise of private armies could mark the beginning of a world where conflicts are fought not for national security, but for the financial interests of the elite. But perhaps the most unsettling aspect of this phenomenon is its secrecy. While some names like Blackwater and Wagner occasionally make headlines, the vast majority of these operations go unnoticed by the general public. The wealthy elites who employ these forces ensure that their dealings remain in the shadows, avoiding scrutiny and public outrage. The lack of transparency means that by the time the public becomes aware of their actions, the damage has already been done. So, what does the future hold? If the current trend continues, private military forces could play an even greater role in shaping global conflicts. As nations grow more dependent on PMCs, and billionaires continue to amass military capabilities once reserved for governments, the world could see a dramatic shift in power dynamics. The unchecked rise of private armies raises urgent questions about security, ethics, and accountability. Without intervention, we may soon find ourselves in a world where war is no longer fought between nations, but between the highest bidders. In the end, the underground network of private armies for the wealthy is not just a hidden industry, it is a force quietly reshaping the world. Whether this leads to an era of unprecedented chaos or forces global leaders to establish tighter controls remains to be seen. But one thing is certain, those who control these private forces hold more power than we could ever imagine, and the consequences of their actions will shape the future of warfare itself.